Yo, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. It's another day. 9:50 a.m. Pacific time. It's June 21st, 2026. Hope you're having a good day. Let's begin. In Taylor Swift's beach town, every clue becomes a wedding rumor. When a large tent appeared next door to Taylor Swift's Watch Hill estate this week, it didn't take long for speculation about the superstar's impending nuptials to ripple through the affluent New England seaside village and the internet. This is in Westerly, Rhode Island. Soon fans were swapping theories online, photographers were staking out vantage points, and residents found themselves fielding questions about a wedding that never was, or at least a wedding that seems yet to happen. The rumors so far have proved unfounded, but they offered a glimpse into life in Watch Hill, the Rhode Island beach community in the town of Westerly, close to the Connecticut border, where Swift has owned a home for more than a decade and where curiosity about the singer has become woven into everyday life. Rumors take hold from the nearby lighthouse. Visitors crane for a better view of Swift's mansion, a sprawling white home perched atop a rocky bluff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Security cameras dotted the property, and a guard called out to visitors who strayed too close. Wedding planner Nicole Cimarel, dressed in black, stood outside the small white chapel across from the massive yellow Ocean House Hotel. Swift's neighbors on the beach waving along cars and buses that slowed and directing traffic to keep moving. She watched visitors speculate about a wedding she said she knew wasn't Swift's. She's working a different wedding every weekend in June in that spot. Still, the questions kept coming. Is Taylor Swift getting married here? Many have asked. Cimarel said. She said there had been a lot of chatter as people tried to connect sightings of people who know Swift in local shops to impending nuptials, but she doubted Watch Hill would be practical for a wedding of that scale because of its limited luxury lodging. The Watch Hill rumors also dovetailed with separate online speculation that Swift and her fiance, Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce, were planning a celebration at Madison Square Garden, though no details about the pair's wedding have been released despite multiple requests for comment to Swift's spokesperson. The tent itself, Cimarel said, was hardly unusual. Next weekend there will be another tent just like this. For 2 summers, Westerly Police Department Community Service Officer Nick Corratella has stood at the entrance to a public path leading to the beach beside Swift's estate, answering questions from beachgoers and keeping traffic moving. They come to the beach, but then they also ask if she's here or not, Cortella said. He said he can't help but joke around with some fans. I'll say, "Oh, did you hear that she moved?" he said. And they'll say, "No." And I say, "Yeah, Dwayne The Rock Johnson moved in." And they'll go, "Oh, really?" And then they'll walk away. That's pretty funny, he concluded. Over the years, he's seen plenty of unusual reactions. His coworker once spotted a fan on their knees, bowing toward the entrance gate near the property. Visitors have shouted, "I love you, Taylor," from the roadside. One woman convinced her granddaughter he was Swift's security guard and posed for a photo with him. Cortella has fielded a few questions about the supposed wedding, but not as many as he expected. At this point, it's part of my job, he said. It makes me smile, it makes me laugh, I have no problem with it. It makes the day go by. Living with Taylor Swift. Down near a strip of beach boutiques, lifelong resident Lauren Nigarelli said the frenzy surrounding the star has eased since Swift first moved into the neighborhood in 2013. Back then, Nigarelli recalled fans would drive around in circles by her shop, playing Swift songs. Things have definitely calmed down since then, she said. Today, Swift's presence remains a fixture among local businesses in what she described as a quaint New England coastal community. Nigarelli, a realtor who owns the boutiques, Tide and Tide Kids said she began selling apparel emblazoned with Holiday House, the nickname associated with Swift's mansion, after children began coming into the store asking for it. On Saturday, she was also selling a Taylor Swift Travis Kelce wedding sticker book. I think every shop has something related to her, Nirelli said. On the beach below the mansion, Audrey and John Curtis, a married couple from Connecticut who have been vacationing in Westerly for years, settled into beach chairs and evaded the wedding rumors. We were just looking up at her house, Audrey Curtis said, pointing toward the mansion. She's not getting married here now, though. Curtis said she had heard various theories, including speculation that a wedding might be held at Ocean House. But as she thought through the logistics, she became skeptical. Then I was thinking about how would everybody get here, she said. In New York, you got JFK, you've got LaGuardia, and she's got two penthouses in New York that she combined, so I figured they could obviously have more people there. Her husband wasn't so sure. They could lie and say it's happening there, but it's happening there, John Curtis said. When important people do things, they don't want people to know. Alright, y'all, so moving on to the next one. How the 2026 primaries are reshaping the Democratic Party. The struggle over control over the Democratic Party's direction has rolled to new heights. This year, with New York's primary on Tuesday looming as the next major battlefield between left and center, from Maine to California, progressive and centrist forces have collided in an unusual event, unprecedented number of primaries for local, state, and congressional office that have divided the party along ideological and often generational lines. The formal party structure is getting weaker and outside groups are getting stronger, said Liam Kerr, co-founder of Welcome and Group, a group working to support Democrat centrists, in a judgment echoed by many progressive activists. We have not been a place where entire ecosystems of groups are effectively running parties within the parties in the explicit direct factional warfare. These confrontations have not produced a knockout victory for either side. The left has helped propel Graham Plattner to the Senate nomination in Maine and Zohran Mamdani to the majority in New York City, while centrists have cheered the primary successes of Xavier Becerra in the California governor's race and Josh Turek in Iowa's Senate contest. On balance, though, the left so far has outpointed the center in these contests. An advantage it could widen if several Mamdani-endorsed congressional candidates win in New York, as is expected. This has been a banner year for progressive candidates, and the progressive movement, said Joseph Kvergis, executive director of Our Revolution, the political organization found by Senator Bernie Sanders. We're seeing a lot of grassroots electoral energy. In many ways, the left's success this year replaced that of President Donald Trump's first term, when frustration over the Democratic congressional leadership and ability to more effectively resist him powered the 2018 victories of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the other three members of the left-swing squad. When President Trump is actually in office and Democratic voters are more frustrated with their party's capabilities to block him, they go even further in the direction of the left, said David Wasserman, senior political analyst for the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. It's not coincidental that 2018 was the initial burst of the squad, and now we're seeing an expansion of it to a degree we didn't in the intervening years. But Democratic centrists correctly point out that a significant majority of the successful progressive primary candidates are winning in safely Democratic areas. In the competitive seats that will decide control of the House and Senate, the party still largely relies on moderate nominees, and for those candidates, the left's rise even in safe seats and could prove an unwelcome complication. There's a difference between winning in a safe Democratic House district and being competitive nationally, and that's the tension within the party, said John Lawrence, who served as who served as Representative Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff while she was House Speaker. How the party's left wing gained strength. The Democratic Party has always been a coalition of disparate, even antagonistic factions, but the level of institutionalized conflict between left and center in Democratic primaries now is unprecedented. Michael Kassin, a Georgetown University historian and author of a history of the Democratic Party, What It Took to Win, said the rise of these proxy battles between groups on left and center reflects the declining influence of the formal state and national party organizations. They're basically an empty shell, so everybody can jump in with their organization, their money, and their supporters. Kassin said, these battles are the party, much more than they used to be. Both sides agree that infrastructure for waging this struggle is more developed on the left. Groups including Sanders or Revolution, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, affiliated with Senator Elizabeth Warren, Justice Democrats in spirit closest to Ocasio-Cortez and other members of the Squad, and Leaders We Deserve, founded by gun control activist David Hogg, have constructed a conveyor belt to identify, recruit, train, and fund left-leaning candidates. Giver Jeezy said the left's success in this year's primary represents, in many cases, the culmination of years of support and investment in younger office holders. These are not candidates coming out of nowhere. A lot of these candidates have run for down-ballot offices and gained governing experience and are graduating up, he said. You are seeing the maturation of the progressive movement. Centrist groups, including the political action committees associated with Welcome, the Blue Dog and New Democrat factions in the House, and the recently formed group, majority Democrats have not built nearly as much institutional strength. Not even close, Kerr said. The modern activist left is effectively its own political party. This imbalance in capacity means progressive groups have intervened in far more primaries than the centrists, but each side can point to significant wins since Trump returned to office. Several of the left's biggest victories have come in mayoral races, with Democratic Socialist Mamdani in New York and Katie Wilson in Seattle last year defeating centrist Democrats in Los Angeles. Progressive City Council member Nithya Raman has reached this November's general election against Mayor Karen Vance. In Washington, D.C., Democratic Socialist Janice Lewis George last week won the Democratic Party for mayor, which essentially guarantees her election in November. The centrist Democrats have performed best in governor contests. Mike Sherrill soundly beat a progressive primary challenger en route to winning the New Jersey governorship last year. In New York, Gov. Kathy Hochul quashed a left flank challenge from her lieutenant governor before it ever got going. In Maine's ranked choice voting, Hannah Pingree last week beat two candidates somewhat to her left and two somewhat to her right for the gubernatorial nomination. Most dramatically, California's gubernatorial primary this month, former Representative Becerra bested Tom Steyer, who spent over $200 million of his own money running as a sort of billionaire Bernie. What the California Democratic electorate overwhelmingly wanted is a normie Trump fighter, said Democratic strategist Sean Clegg, who worked on an independent exponential campaign backing Becerra. We don't want to run as the party of the status quo, but voters said, give me someone who will hold the center, and it was hard to beat. Progressives won the highest profile Senate primary so far in Maine when Plattner, an oyster farmer, routed Governor Janet Mills, the choice of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Conversely, centrist Josh Turek decisively beat progressive favorite Zach Wahls in Iowa. In Texas, nominee James Tallarico arguably angled somewhat more to the center in Iowa. to the center than his opponent, Representative Jasmine Crockett. But the ideological lines were nearly as sharp. Still to come are left versus center Senate showdowns in August in Minnesota, where progressive Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan is slightly favored, and Michigan, where progressive Abdul El Sayed and centrist Haley Stevens are closely matched, and a September race in Massachusetts, where centrist Republican Seth Moulton is running uphill against liberal Senator Ed Markey. The results in House races tipped the overall score toward the left. Centrists have beaten progressives in House races in California, Texas, and North Carolina. But in California alone, progressives advanced in several other key House contests, including by beating an establishment-backed candidate for the right to oppose vulnerable Republican Representative David Bilodeau. Progressive choices have also won hotly contested House primary races in New Jersey, Montana, Maine, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, districts that might have seemed unfavorable terrain. I don't think we're seeing a Bernie Grant revolution, but we're seeing an uptick in anger among Democratic base that is leading to progressive wins in unexpected places, Wasserman said. Progressives are likely to secure more wins in Tuesday's New York primary. Mamdani has endorsed a slate of 3 very liberal House candidates, including former New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, who appears likely to oust Republican Daniel Goldman. In a nearby district, Democratic Socialist Lisa Avila Chevalier, another Mamdani pick, faces a tough challenge to uproot Republican Adriano Espelette. One admirer has said that if Chevalier wins, she might instantly become the most left-leaning member of Congress. Democratic voters are throwing out the playbook. Several common policy ideas link this year's progressive candidates. Almost all of them support a Sanders-style Medicare for all takeover of the healthcare system and a Warren-style tax on wealth. Almost all call for abolishing and replacing the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Notably, the progressive candidates are emphasizing economic themes and mostly minimizing their discussion of polarizing social issues. Candidates are really speaking to people's material needs and vowing to fight to improve their standard of living, Gervasi said. Kerr agreed that a disciplined focus on economic issues, one that more closely echoes the messaging of Sanders' first presidential run, has been central to the left's success this year. Progressive candidates are acting differently than they did in 2022. He said they've been more like Bernie 2016 than Bernie 2020. High economic populism and low woke. By far the most important non-economic issue for progressive candidates this year has been Israel's war in Gaza, along with AIPAC, the powerful U.S. political group supporting it. Almost everywhere mainstream Democrats have struggled to defend how, having accepted support from AIPAC and or having refused to break with former President Joe Biden's deference to Israel while it raised Gaza. Some of these left-wing positions, such as the criticism of Israel's actions in Gaza and the Biden's response to it, clearly represent consensus views in the Democratic Party, and hardly anyone disputes that on economic issues, Democratic officials and voters alike have shifted toward more populist positions. It is absolutely true that Democratic Party of today is much more than party of Bernie Sanders than Hillary Clinton on the economic side, said Democratic pollster Evan Roth Smith, who leads the Blueprint Project, which studies underlying currents of public opinion. But Smith and other strategists aligned more with the party center say it would be a dangerous mistake for Democrats to conclude that the primary electorate, much less swing voters, want the party to move as far left as progressive candidates urge. Smith argued the left is succeeding primarily because it appears more determined to fight Trump by whatever means necessary. They're demonstrating to voters that intensity of their convictions in a way the establishment party and current office holders are not credible on, Smith said. That is what the voters are rewarding more than any political ideology. Democratic strategist Liz Smith is advising the centrist majority Democrats as well as the bench, a group focused on recruiting Democratic candidates from diverse backgrounds. She too believes Democratic voters are looking for new approaches than for ideological fervor. Democratic voters, she said, feel Democrats were out of touch, they were too old, they didn't fight, and they didn't know how to win races. So the end result of that is they are throwing out the playbook for what a traditional Democratic candidate looks like. In deep blue districts, the impulse has propelled to turn left-leaning candidates, she said, but in more swing districts, it means people who don't have a traditional political resume across both kinds of seats. Smith added, I think the through line thus far, the establishment lane is the weakest it has probably been for decades. How November's midterms may shape 2028, left and center acknowledged it won't be possible to render a final score on the Democrats' internal struggle until after the general election. While most of the progressive candidates are winning in primaries for safely Democratic House seats, some have been nominated in highly competitive races, including the Valadao House seat, a rural Trump-won Maine House district, and the main Senate contest between Platner and Republican Senator Susan Collins. If the progressive candidates lose those general elections, it will strengthen the centrist arguments that the left is weakening the party by running candidates who do not win on competitive terrain. Less easy to quantify, but also critical to define whether will be assessments of how the increase in leftist nominees affects the electoral politics of the Democratic centrists. Given Smith, the pollster, noted that Republicans have spent substantial sums in the Democratic primaries this year to more progressive candidates in part so they can use them to negatively define the party, even in swing districts where moderates are running. The ultimate judgment among Democrats about 2026 primary work will likely ripple into 2028 after the 2018 campaign. The election of the squad contributed to a widespread sense in the party that the best way of Democrats to beat Trump in 2020 was to match his polarizing agenda with a bold progressive agenda of their own. That belief exerted a magnetic pull leftward during the early stages of the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. Multiple candidates endorsed a single-payer healthcare plan despite concerns about its huge price tag, and almost all of them raised their hands on debate stages to embrace very liberal immigration policies. But once voting began in 2020, Democratic primaries voters, particularly black Democrats in South Carolina, grew increasingly concerned that the approach would not beat Trump and rallied behind the candidate who had bent the least to that pressure and looked at most electable Biden. I have no doubt the left will say they are the ascending wing, and there will be presidential candidates in 2028 who feel the need to lurch leftward, said Liz Smith, who advised Pete Buttigieg in 2020, but she continued, Democratic hopefuls should learn the lessons of 2020. What performs best in deep blue districts and social media isn't always what wins elections, and isn't even always what performs best with the base. In reliably blue places, Democratic primary voters can support the most liberal candidates without worrying if they will win the general election, but in the races that will decide congressional control, let alone the next presidential nomination, even many liberal Democratic voters are likely to weigh their support for a progressive agenda against their overriding priority on choosing candidates who can beat Trump and his MAGA allies. For Democrats in the races that count most, electability remains likely to Trump ideology. Moving on, new poll shows Americans shifted toward Democrats as GOP support declines. An edge in the House, while a month's Democrats gaining ground. As the November midterms approach, new polling indicates growing dissatisfaction with the Republican Party, with many Americans signaling support for Democrats to regain control of Congress. Set to win a crushing victory in the fall, the Democrats have looked poised to win an overwhelming victory for months in the upcoming midterm elections after more than a year and a half of unpopular policies and constant political crisis that has upended any love for the Republicans. Dominating all branches of government, U.S. President Donald Trump and the Republican-controlled House and Senate have put the United States in a precarious position in a short period of time, and Americans seem fed up with trade conflicts, domestic unrest, and foreign wars. The Democrats want to win back control. The only way President Trump could be reined in is for control of Congress to shift back towards the Democrats, and that looks like it could happen in November when the American people head to the polls in the 2026 midterm elections. Trump could lose big in the midterms. Midterm elections generally see the party that holds the presidency lose, but Trump and the Republicans could be in for a massive defeat in the fall, according to new polling from NBC News that found the Dems are favored to win over the GOP. What the latest polling reveals, conducted between May 29th and June 7th, the new polling revealed that 49% of the 2,000 registered voters surveyed wanted the Democrats to win back control of the House and Senate in November when asked to choose from a generic candidate. Nearly half still favored Republicans. Another 44% wanted the Republicans to maintain control of Congress, giving the Dems a 5-point edge in the midterms, while 7% reported that they were undecided. Looking at past polling data, looking at similar points in previous midterm election cycles, both parties were tied on the generic ballot in the May 2022 NBC News poll, while Democrats had a 10-point lead in the June 2018 NBC News poll. Ben Camisar and Bridget Bowman of NBC News noted. 2026 World Cup packages, VIP soccer travel packages. Start planning your trip today. That's the sponsor of today's video. Is a 5-point generic ballot lead enough? A 5-point lead may not seem like a powerful position to be in a Democratic Party, but it was the other key findings related to this figure that made it a tough pill to swallow for any Republican running in the upcoming midterm election in the fall. The devil is in the details. According to the data, independent voters lean towards Democrats by 12 points. This is important because these voters are the most likely demographic to shift the midterms in the Democratic Party's favor across all races in the country. Other very important revelations in the polling were the findings that a majority of Latino and black voters favored the Democrats, as did voters under the age of 50 and voters with a college degree. Republicans held an edge with men and white voters. A sustained desire for change. The recent 5-point lead finding on the generic ballot was consistent with an earlier figure from March that showed Democrats led Republicans by 6 points. While the numbers are bad for Republicans, it still isn't clear that they mean Democrats will be swept into power. Rocky numbers for Republicans. These are rocky numbers for Republicans, but they are not catastrophic. GOP pollster Bill Mintroff of Public Opinion Strategies, who conducted the poll with the Democratic pollster Jeff Hurwitz of Hart Research Associates, explained according to NBC News. The midterm fight won't be easy. The Hill noted that Democrats are currently in the minority in the Senate and the House, but are looking to flip both chambers for the first time in over 2 decades. However, it's not going to be an easy task for Democrats, even with good numbers. What Dems need to flip the Senate. If the Democrats want to flip the Senate, then they need to win control of 4 seats that are currently held by Republicans. A recent assessment by the nonpartisan group Cook Political report rated just 1 seat in contention as leaning toward being taken. seats Democrats could win. The Senate seat held by retiring Republican Thom Tillis in North Carolina could go to the Democrats, as could two other seats that group says are toss-ups for the Dems: Susan Collins' Senate seat in Maine and Josh Husted, Ohio's Senate seat. Are Alaska and Texas in contention? The Hill reported that Democrats are optimistic about their chances of capturing Senate seats in Alaska and Texas. However, the Cook Political Report assessed that both races lean towards the Republicans. The House will be an easier fight. An edge in the House. While a months-long redistricting battle has given Republicans a shot at winning 9 additional House seats in November, the Cook Political Report found that of the 18 seats up for grabs, in toss-up races, 14 are currently held by Republicans. Yo, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Comment down below. Let me know what you think. Follow me on Instagram, The Studio 11. Follow me on X, The Studio 2020. I like to say Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you in the next one.